So this is it, everyone, the final destination on this very, very long Kirby Marathon. It's taken quite a while to get here, but we're finally here and we have 3 last spin-offs to look at. And these 3 games have a very common theme between them. Touch controls. Kirby has always kind of been a bit of a lab rat when it comes to Nintendo. If they have an odd idea that they just don't know how to make a game out of, then just throw Kirby into it. Sure, that'll work. And as Nintendo focused on touchscreens for a good chunk of time, naturally Kirby was going to get that treatment as well. 3 times, actually. And like I said last time, these 3 games deserve their own video because they walk a fine line between mainline game and spin-off. They all have this very unique idea, like typical spin-offs would, but they're still full and proper adventures. So there you go. But let's cut the small talk and get to the first game on our list, Kirby Canvas Curse for the DS.
You say good morning, I say good night.
Oh man, the early DS commercials were so bizarre. Clearly from a different era. Remember when the first ad campaigns for the DS let you know that touching is good? Woo boy, that was a time. The story this time is super simple. A portal opens up in the sky, and an evil witch named Dracia shows up out of nowhere and turns the world of Dreamland into paint. Kirby chases after her, and once up close, the witch turns him into a ball! Again, it's not really a form that he's unfamiliar with, but okay. And with the help of the magical paintbrush, he sets off to defeat Dracia and save Dreamland once again. And it's kind of funny, the paintbrush thing makes a little bit more sense in the European title, which was changed to Power Paintbrush. I guess maybe curse, you can't say in Europe or something? These name changes, I don't get it. And this time we have another 2D platformer, but rather than controlling Kirby directly, you manipulate him by tapping him to roll faster, or by drawing lines to create platforms or barriers. And honestly, despite this basically being a full-fledged platformer, that's basically the whole game right there. It's a simple concept that combines with level designs that are also simple, but are fairly beefy and often have quite a few obstacles that really require some precision play. The game moves at a fairly quick pace as well, so things can often get legitimately difficult. Especially in the water levels, where Kirby constantly floats to the top, fighting you on getting him where he needs to go. Oh my goodness, it's painful. And to spice things up, each level has 3 medals to collect, some of them hidden behind walls that you can't get to until you press a switch later on in the game. And copy abilities show up too, a whopping 11 of them. And it's kind of interesting, despite spin-offs being roughly half of the entire franchise, Canvas Curse is the 3rd of only 3 games that actually use these series staple abilities. I don't know, maybe it's not all that interesting, but I find it kinda neat at least. Some of the abilities really influence your control, like wheel or burning, while some others mainly work as a form of attack, like beam or spark. And then there's balloon, which is an absolute pain in the butt to use. Levels have quite a bit of stuff going on, but they are pretty short, with each world of 3 stages roughly taking about 20 to 30 minutes each. And while there aren't really any specific parts of the adventure that are necessarily memorable, it's still actually a pretty good time. The soundtrack is interesting too, remixing a ton of classic tunes with a very mechanical theme to them. It's honestly kind of an odd choice because it really doesn't match the game all that much at all, but after listening to it for a while, it is a pretty good roundup of songs. Some of them would end up being straight ported to Planet Robobot, where they make a whole lot more sense. And to be honest, it's the other stuff in this game where things kinda start to go blah. A somewhat interesting change to Canvas Curse is the removal of sub-games. Well, kinda. There are 3 boss battles with 2 stages of difficulty each. But rather than actually fighting a boss, you play a minigame instead. There's Block Attack, which has Kirby bouncing all over the place, and you have to create bumpers and break blocks to get to a battle with the one-eyed Cloud Wonder, Kracko. Next up is Kart Run, a race against King Dedede with you getting speed boosts by you constantly collecting food, and you control where the cart goes thanks to the touchscreen. And last up is Paint Panic, where you redraw a given outline fast enough to prevent explosion, leading to defusing a bomb by tapping buttons. And I guess the result of that is blowing up Paint Roller instead of you? Yeah, that'll show you. Guys, we're looking at 2005 DS here. Any excuse to use the touchscreen was taken shamelessly. Is it a bad thing that there's no legit boss fights except for the final one? Well, we'll get to that point soon enough. As for some of the other extra stuff, well, there are a couple challenge stages that use a few of the abilities, one of which is Balloon. Each regular stage can be played in a time attack mode, as well as a line attack mode, challenging you to use as little line as possible, which honestly, that is pretty cool. And you can even unlock some extra characters to play as too. Sounds kinda cool, right? Well, when you eliminate the copy abilities and characters are only kinda different, I don't know, I really can't be bothered playing as someone new. If you think this comes anywhere near close to the likes of Meta Nightmare, no, not even close. You can unlock different patterns for your lines, you can replace the soundtrack with Nightmare in Dreamlands. Yeah, when you're not playing the main adventure as Kirby, which again, it is fun, the rest of the game kinda falls flat. Speaking of the main adventure, eventually Kirby makes his way to the world of Drossia, and after one pretty good actual fight against the evil witch, she goes through a transformation. And hey, look at that! A hell demon! It's about time we saw one of those again. This is the Drossia Soul, and the battle is basically a culmination of everything you learned so far, which makes for a really good fight. It's really weird, considering the other bosses are just minigames, you would think that it's because they couldn't make a good boss fight to save their lives. But no, both battles against Drossia are actually pretty enjoyable. Albeit an easy one though. She's quickly defeated and sent back to her dimension. Kirby then returns to his dimension with hands and feet properly back where they belong. The magical paintbrush vanishes and Dreamland is returned to normal, ending Kirby Canvas Curse. And actually, there is a bit of continuity here. Drossia is actually not an only child. That witch boss that uses paint from Triple Deluxe, that is Paintra, and while not 100% confirmed, she is presumably Drossia's sister. And what's kind of funny on top of that, there's even another sister, but she doesn't show up until Canvas Curse's sequel, Kirby and the Rainbow Curse for the Wii U. Boom! Nailed it with that segue. Or Kirby and the Rainbow Paintbrush. Is the word curse seriously like this really taboo thing in Europe? Like, let me know, I legit have no idea. The story begins on a peaceful day in Dreamland, blah blah blah. I've said this like 100 times already. Kirby and Bandana D are just minding their business when another portal opens up in the sky and a magical beam sucks away all of the life and color from the land. A paintbrush shows up though, and she's being chased by two evil hands, and thanks to her quick thinking, she brings the heroic duo back to life just in time to save her and shoo the evil away. That paintbrush, named Align, explains the problem on hand, though Kirby is really only interested in his lost apple. Rest in peace. But after coming to his senses, they all make their way through the portal and the adventure begins. It's another simple plot that gets the job done. My only issue though is that this time around, Kirby is just a ball by choice. No evil spell or anything like that. Kirby just doesn't feel like using his feet now. What? I mean, I guess he did that in Tilt and Tumble as well. Can we call this a sub-series and it's like the Kirby Lazy series? I'm fine with that. And yeah, like I said before, this is a sequel to Canvas Curse, so it plays basically the same. Tap Kirby to speed up, and you draw lines on the touchscreen to bring him to other platforms. But the most noticeable difference with this game are the graphics. And oh man, this game is beautiful. As you can plainly see, the game goes for a claymation art style, where everything is made out of the most colorful arrangement of Play-Doh you could ever imagine. Especially in those cutscenes, man. With the forced reduced frame rate, it makes for an amazing looking result. Simply, every level in this game looks outstanding. That being said though, there is a massive problem with this. If you're watching the footage on this video right now, you will think the same thing, the game is absolutely gorgeous. However, this is a game on the Wii U, and it's a purely touchscreen game, meaning you have to keep your eyes on the gamepad like 90% of the time. The gamepad screen isn't bad, don't get me wrong, but it honestly hurts the game experience knowing that the game looks like this, but you gotta look at it like this. And it is a common complaint, and considering we're talking about the Wii U here, it's a very unique one as well. But for many people, this ruins the entire game, and understandably so. If the game somehow, at this point, got a port on the 3DS, it would probably do just as good, if not better. However, I actually think that Rainbow Curse is still a better product than Canvas Curse. That's something that you don't really see people say that often. There were a few tweaks made to the formula established in Canvas Curse. Copy abilities are no longer here, the sub-games, or really any form of minigame, that's gone as well. Kirby is the only playable character this time, and the game moves at a noticeably slower speed. And sure, that all sounds like downgrades, but instead, I feel that we got a much more concentrated experience that takes Canvas Curse's mechanics and tosses them into a more traditional Kirby game. And it also focuses a whole lot more on exploration rather than pure challenge, partially thanks to levels being bigger and seeing a wider area around Kirby at all times, and partially because each stage now has 5 hidden treasure chests. The environments were bright and colorful in Canvas Curse, and the soundtrack was neat, but thematically, that game is very much its own thing. Rainbow Curse feels more like the Kirby that we're used to, just made out of clay. As far as the soundtrack goes, I've said this about other Kirby games, but once again, it is unnecessarily really good. Guys, I know by this point I'm totally coming off as a broken record here, but it still boggles my mind that Kirby, of all of the Nintendo franchises, consistently puts out some of the best gaming soundtracks ever. Between the original tracks and a bunch of remixes, it is a fantastic listen all around. There's even a music room, which is something that Kirby games typically do have, but there are over 30 remixes found here that are nowhere to be found in the actual game. They're just remixes for the sake of being remixes, and considering they're pretty much all really good, they're just spoiling me at this point. That is a-okay by me. Now, as for the lack of copy abilities, instead, Kirby will occasionally run into 3 different transformations, all of which are courtesy of Align's painting ability, not without a little reminder that the old animal buddies did once exist. I really miss them. There's the tank, where you tap points on the screen to shoot with your expandable mouth cannon, the submarine, where you tap to move Kirby as he shoots missiles automatically, and the rocket, where you use the rainbow lines to guide Kirby to your liking. And I actually really liked using all 3 of these. And I know I kinda made a big deal of Rainbow Curse feeling like more of a classic Kirby game, but in this instance, I am okay with the lack of abilities. Back in Canvas Curse, they were mostly used for combating enemies or breaking specific blocks, and for a game of this style, I much prefer occasionally getting shoved into these areas that are built around these transformations. At that point, it's really not that different from Epic Yarn, which that game did transformations totally fine as well. And on top of all of that, there are these secret figurines to collect, which are really just more of a showcase of the game's art style than anything else. Aline's secret diary, which is just adorable, despite the drawings being, well, oh man, is that Tuxedo Mask? Each of the 3 Kirby Smash Bros. Amiibo can be used as well, although only once a day, which is a weird restriction, to enhance your skills for 1 level each. Okay, I'm not really clamoring to use them ever, so there's that. There's also local multiplayer where friends with Wii remotes can play as fully controllable Waddle Dees, which I don't know, that's kind of counterintuitive to the entire game's touchscreen design. And considering there's a good chance you already have a Wii remote, There's nothing stopping you from playing co-op by yourself, essentially playing Rainbow Curse as a proper platformer. They clearly didn't think this through. The extra stuff isn't all bad though. There's actually a kind of cool challenge mode with 48 different challenges that are either timing or survival based. Granted, all you get for completing all of this is just one last figurine, which is really lame, but at least they're kind of fun to play. And lastly, by the glory that is King DDD, there are actual boss fights. Rather than doing the weird minigame stuff like before, you actually have proper boss battles that require timing and skill, which is finally kinda neat. You see, they had a good thing going, but there's only 3 bosses and you fight them all twice. So you may be noticing a trend right about now. Oh man, this thing that the game does is super awesome, but actually when you think about it, it really isn't. I still do think that Rainbow Curse is the better product of the two, but a lot of the decisions that they made were really, really dumb. Also, come on, Meta Knight's mask covers the entire face. What is that? What is that? So it turns out that the evil sucking away color thing is thanks to Alline's old friend, Glacia. And hey, there you go. Drossia, Paintra, and Glacia. The holy trinity of color-based Kirby bosses. Whoop-de-doo, she's going down. Not as cool as the fight her sister gave us, but it's still a pretty serviceable fight. And once you defeat her, we find out that she has actually been possessed by an evil force known as the Dark Crafter. This is the main bad guy? A cloud of colors? Oh, yeah, that's totally a hell spawn if I've ever seen it. This leads to a final fight as Dark Crafter flies through space, and honestly, it is one of the weakest final bosses in the entire franchise. Far too easy and beaten far too quickly. We're in space, for crying out loud, this needs to be cooler. However, that being said, that clearly didn't stop them from making one of the most epic music tracks in the entirety of Kirby's universe. Why do you composers keep doing this to me? Once finally defeated, Glacia crafts a star to send Kirby back to his home. And well, yeah, that's kind of it. Really not much of an ending here. And it was at this point when I was playing the game for the first time that I realized, despite being figures for these two, Meta Knight and King Dedede make absolutely no appearances during the adventure, which is really uncalled for. This doesn't count! But alright, both curse games out of the way, moving on. Finally, we have made our way to the last spin-off, Kirby Mass Attack, back on the DS. It's actually one of the last games, aside from Pokemon, that Nintendo themselves published for the system. That's kinda neat. It's another peaceful day and whatever. This skull beast, Necrotius, shows up out of nowhere and with his skull gang aims to cover the land in total darkness. And knowing full well that a sleeping Kirby would prove disastrous to his plans, he splits Kirby into 10 copies of himself and promptly defeats 9 of them. Yeah, that's right, not all 10, just 9 of them. That's the only reason why this adventure continues, cause this guy's an idiot. This time around, the gameplay is totally different. As some sort of omnipotent onlooker, you control a star that guides the group of Kirbys wherever you wish. You can also tap and flick each individual Kirby to latch onto different objects and attack enemies. And at that point, sorta like Canvas Curse, that's basically the whole game. At the start of each world, there's only one Kirby to control, but by collecting a ton of fruit, you eventually multiply, maxing out to 10. Kinda like how cells multiply. Oh my god, we're going back to middle school science up in here. You can lose Kirbys too if you're far too careless, which is bad since many obstacles require a large amount of Kirbys to either get through or score a hidden medal. It's almost like Pikmin in a way, commanding an army of really small creatures and destroying nearly everything in sight, knowing full well your army's lives are replaceable. That's really, really morbid when you think about it that way. Now that is basically the majority of the game, but there is quite a bit of variation in gameplay styles, such as swimming, which is way better than Canvas Curse, shifting your weight among all 10 Kirbys to move a floating basket, and even some star surfing. In fact, basically half of World 3 is entirely based on changing things up. However, that being said, the game overall gets pretty repetitive pretty quickly. I think it's because it simply gets tedious constantly scrubbing the touchscreen, but unless you're playing this game in short bursts only, I feel this idea gets pretty old fast. It's probably just a matter of preference at this point, but despite definitely being a solid gameplay mechanic that is kinda fun, I feel it makes for an overall alright package and not much more. Outside of the main adventure though, we see the return of the sub-games, of which there are a whopping 6 of them, more than any individual Kirby game in the past. Field Frenzy is a basic game of whack-a-mole. Nothing really too fancy about that one. Dash Course tests your reflexes as you tap the appropriate shapes on the touchscreen to get as far as you can in a time limit. Kinda like that one sub-game in Kirby 64 actually. Brawl Ball is a game of pinball, something that Kirby is just a bit familiar with. Only one table this time around, unfortunately, though there are a few bosses to go against, and my goodness, the game actually feels right. Kirby's Pinball Land's physics were, let's just say, Game Boy-erific. This is actually pretty solid, so pretty good in my books. Curtain Call has you counting the correct number of Kirbys. That's, Strato Patrol EOS is a top-down space shooter, and like the main game, uses touch controls as you gather up a chunk of 10 Kirbys and just blast away everything. And this one is actually fairly bulky, taking roughly 20 minutes to complete, and even ending with a returning nightmare. I mean, okay, that's really random, but I can roll with it. And lastly, there is Kirby Quest, a series of turn-based battles with your moves being determined by tapping the button at the right time on the touchscreen. Else you miss the colors entirely and take damage yourself. Not good. This one is pretty fun as well, and I mean, hey, with this and Team Kirby Clash, we're getting closer and closer to a proper Kirby RPG. That would be awesome! What's also really cool is the final boss is Dark Matter, making a surprise return before he does implant a Robobot. Always a good time seeing this thing show up. But what's odd though are some of the mini bosses, which are these guys. Most of you probably would have no idea who they are. Funnily enough, they're actually from the anime Right Back At Ya. Really weird seeing Nintendo even acknowledge the anime's existence. Well, crap, I mean, I guess now I have to talk about it at some point. Despite there being more sub-games than normal, this is still just an alright set of games. One half of them are pretty good, the other half of them are just like, why? Why is this a thing? Anyway, let's wrap this game up. Oh yeah, the Squeak Squad shows up too. The quest eventually leads Kirby into space. Clearly not the last time this is gonna happen. And inside he goes into the evil Necro Nebula. After fighting all of the previous bosses a second time, they all find themselves face to face with Necrodius once again, holding the staff that would return Kirby to normal. Then he eats it. That'll show him? This leads to a final battle that really doesn't have many surprises. By this point in the game, basically everything seems pretty run-of-the-mill. He is soon defeated, the restored staff brings Kirby back to normal, and on his trusty Warp Star, he makes his way home. And that ends Kirby Mass Attack, a decent touchscreen game, just a bit too repetitive for my tastes. To be honest with you, the official artwork for the game is like the best part of the entire package. Look at this. This stuff is really, really good. And most importantly, that wraps up the Kirby Marathon. That's it. Which means I have now covered every single Kirby game that has been released currently. And I gotta tell you, feels pretty good. There will still be some more Kirby content coming out in the future because I mean really now, look who you're talking to. But 2017 is also Kirby's 25th anniversary, so there's a really good chance that we'll see some new stuff coming out very soon. But for now, that's it. If you stuck around for both Kirby Marathons, then I appreciate that and I appreciate you. But I have played so much Kirby in such a short amount of time that I am well overdue for passing out for quite a while, so I think I'm gonna go ahead and do that. But stay tuned, because I have videos coming out on other stuff very, very soon. Believe it or not, Kirby is not the only thing in this world that I love. Okay, that's not true at all.